Welcome to the 90th most popular podcast in the universe. This is part 2 of Dante's Inferno 4-part series. Canto XII. The place where we came to descend the bank was mountainous, and, because of what else was there, such that every sight would shun it. Like that landslide which struck the flank of the Adige, this side of Trento, because of an earthquake or the failing of support, where from the summit of the mountain, whence they fell, down to the plain, the rocks lie so strewn that they would provide a path for one who was above. Such was the descent into that valley. And at the very point where the slope had broken, the infamy of Crete was stretched out, the one conceived in the false cow, and when he saw us, he bit himself like one broken within my anger. My wise one shouted toward him, "Perhaps you believe the Duke of Athens is here, who put you to death up in the world. Away, beast, for this man does not come taught by your sister, but goes to see your punishments." Like a bull that wrenches free at the moment it has received the mortal blow, that is unable to walk but jumps here and there, so I saw the Minotaur do. And that alert one cried, "Run to the crossing, it is good to go down while he is in his fit." So we took our way down along that scree, and the stones kept moving under my feet, because of their new burden. I walked thoughtful, and he said, "You are thinking perhaps of this landslide, guarded by that bestial anger I just now put out. Now I would have you know that the other time I came down here into lower hell, this cliff had not yet fallen. But certainly, if I remember well, a little before he came who took from Dis the great spoils of the highest circle, on every side this deep, foul valley trembled so that I thought the universe must be feeling love, by which, some believe, the world has often been turned back into chaos. And at that point this ancient cliff, here and elsewhere, was broken down. But probe the valley with your sight, for we are approaching the river of blood, in which are boiling those who harm others with violence. O blind cupidity and mad rage that so spur us in this short life, and then in the eternal one cook us so evilly. I saw an ample curving ditch that embraces the entire plain, according to what my guide had said. And between the foot of the cliff and it, centaurs were running in file, armed with arrows, as they used to go hunting in the world. Seeing us come down, each stopped, and from the file 3 came forth with bows and with arrows they had selected first. And one cried from afar, "To what punishment do you come, you who are climbing down the bank? Speak from there, otherwise I draw my bow." My master said, "The reply we will make to XIII. Close over there. To your harm has your will always been so hasty." Then he nudged me and said, "That is Nessus, who died because of fair Deianira, and himself avenged himself. The one in the middle, who is gazing at his breast, is the great XIII, who brought up Achilles. That other is Pholeus, who is so full of anger. Around the ditch they go by thousands, shooting with arrows whatever soul emerges from the blood more than his guilt allots. We drew near those swift beasts. XIII took an arrow, and with the notch he moved his beard back from his jaw. When he had uncovered his great mouth, he said to his companions, 'Have you noticed that the one behind moves what he touches? The feet of the dead usually do not so.' And my good leader, who already stood at his breast, where the 2 natures are wedded, replied, 'He is indeed alive, and thus alone I must show him the dark valley. Necessity induces us, and not pleasure.' One left off singing hallelujah, who entrusted me with this strange task. He is not a robber, nor I, a thievish soul. But by that power through which I move my steps along so wild a road, give us one of yours to guide us, and show us where the ford is, and carry this one upon his rump, for he is not a spirit that can walk upon the air. Chiron turned on his right breast, and said to Nisus, Go back and guide them, and, if you meet another company, make them give way. Now we go, with our trusty escort, along the bank of the red boiling, where the boiled ones were uttering high shrieks. I saw people immersed as far as the brow, and the great centaur said, They are tyrants who put their hands to blood and to others' goods. There they weep for their pitiless crimes. There is Alexander and fierce Dionysus, who gave Sicily such grievous years. And that forehead with such black hair is Azzolino, and that other blonde one is Obizo da Este, who truly was murdered by his bastard up in the world. Then I turned to my poet, and he said, Let him now be first for you, and I second. A little further along, the centaur stopped above people who seemed to emerge from the boiling stream as far as the throat. He pointed to a soul by itself to one side, saying, That one cleft in the bosom of God, the heart that still drips blood along the Thames. Then I saw people who held their heads out of the river, and then all their trunks, and of them I recognized many. Thus the blood became shallower and shallower, until it was cooking only feet. And there was our passing of the ditch. Just as on this side you see the boiling stream diminish, said the centaur, I would have you believe that on this other side it lowers its bed deeper and deeper, until it reaches the depth where tyranny must moan. Over there God's justice pierces that Attila who was a scourge on earth, and Pyrrhus and Sextus, and for eternity milks the tears unlocked by the boiling from Rainier da Corneto and Rainier Pazzo, who waged such war on the roads. Then he turned and passed back over the ford. Canto XIII. Not yet had Nisus reached the other side when we entered a wood that no path marked. Not green leaves, but dark in color. Not smooth branches, but knotted and twisted. No fruit was there, but thorns with poison. Not such harsh thickets, nor so dense do those wild beasts hold, that hate the cultivated places between Cesena and Corneto. There the ugly Harpies make their nests, who drove the Trojans from Strophera, with dire prophecy of their future woe. Their wings are broad, their necks and faces human, their feet have claws, and their great bellies are feathered. They utter laments on the strange trees. And my good master, before you enter, know that you are in the second subcircle, he began to say, and will be until you come to the horrible sands. Therefore look carefully, and you will see things that would make you disbelieve my speech. I heard cries of woe on every side, but saw no person uttering them, so that all dismayed I stood still. My belief is that he believed that I must believe that so many voices among those thickets came forth from people hidden from us. Therefore my master said, If you break off some little twig from one of these plants, the thoughts you have will all be cut off. Then I stretched out my hand a little before me and plucked a small branch from a great thorn bush. And its stem cried out, Why do you split me? When it had become dark with blood, it began again, Why do you pluck me? Have you no spirit of pity at all? We were men, and now we have become plants. Truly your hand should be more merciful had we been the souls of serpents. As when a green log is burnt at one end, from the other it drips and sputters as air escapes. So from the broken stump came forth words and blood together, and I let the tip fall and stood like one afraid. If he could have believed first, replied my sage, O wounded soul, what he has seen only in my rhymes, he would not have stretched out his hand against you. But the incredible thing made me induce him to do what pains me as well. But tell him who you were, so that as a kind of amends he may refresh your fame in the world above, where he is permitted to return. And the branch, you so tempt me with sweet speech that I cannot be silent, and let it not vex you that I am lured to speak a little. I am he who held both the keys to the heart of Frederic, and returned them, locking and unlocking, so gently that I excluded almost everyone else from his intimacy. I kept faith with my glorious office, so much that because of it I lost sleep and vigor. The whore who never turns her sluttish eyes away from Caesar's dwelling, the common death and vice of courts, inflamed against me all spirits, and those inflamed Augustus, so that my bright honors turned to sad mourning. My spirit, at the taste of disdain, believing my death to flee disdain, made me unjust against my just self. By the strange new roots of this wood, I swear to you that I never broke faith with my lord, who was so worthy of honor. And if either of you goes back to the world, strengthen my memory, languishing still beneath the blow that envy dealt it. My poet waited a little, and then, now that he is silent, he said, do not lose the moment, but speak, ask him what you will. And I to him, you ask him again about what you think will satisfy me, for I could not, so much pity weighs on my heart. Therefore he began again. So many one do liberally for you what your speech has begged, imprisoned spirit. Let it please you still to tell us how the soul is bound in these knots, and tell us, if you can, if anyone ever unties himself from such limbs. The broken branch hissed loudly, and then that wind was converted into these words. Briefly will you be answered. When the fierce soul departs from the body from which it has uprooted itself, Minos sends it to the seventh mouth. It falls into the wood, and no place is assigned to it. But where chance hurls it, there it sprouts like a grain of spelt. It grows into a shoot, then a woody plant. The harpies, feeding on its leaves, give it pain and a window for the pain. Come l'altre veron per nostre spoglie, ma non però calcuna sen rivesta. Che non è giusto aver ciò com si toglie. Qui la stracceremo i per la mesta, selva saranno i nostri corpi appesi, ciascuno al prun dell'ombra sua molesta. Like the others, we will come for our remains, but not so that any may put them on again, for it is not just to have what one has taken from oneself. Here we will drag them, and through the sad wood our corpses will hang, each on the thorn bush of the soul that harmed it. We were still attentive to the broken branch, believing it had more to say, when we were surprised by a noise. Like one who hears the boar and the hunt approaching his post, who hears the beasts and the branches breaking. And behold, two on our left, naked and scratched, fleeing so fast that they were breaking every opposing branch in the forest. The one in front, now hurry, hurry, death, and the other, who seemed to himself too slow. Lano, not so nimble were your legs at the jousts at Topo. And perhaps because his breath was failing, he made one clump of himself and a bush. Behind them, the wood was full of black bitches, ravenous and running like greyhounds, loosed from the chain. They set their teeth to the one that had squatted, tearing him to pieces bit by bit. Then they carried off those suffering members. My guide then took me by the hand and led me to the bush that wept through its bleeding wounds in vain. "O Iacopo," it was saying, "Di Santo Andrea, what did it profit you to make a shield of me? How am I to blame for your wicked life?" When my master stopped above it, he said, "Who are you? who through so many splintered branches puff out with blood your sad speech. And he to us, O souls who have arrived to see the shameful rending that has so divided my leaves from me, gather them together at the foot of my sad shrub. I was from the city that for the Baptist changed its first patron, who for this, with his art, will always grieve it. And were it not that at that crossing of Arno there still remains some trace of him, those citizens who refounded it upon the ashes left by Attila would have labored in vain. Io fei gibetto a me delle mie case. I made my own gallows from my houses. Canto XIV. Compelled by love of my birthplace, I gathered together the scattered leaves and returned them to him who was already silent. Thence we came to the boundary where the second subcircle is divided from the third, and where one sees a horrible art of justice. To make the new things clearly manifest, I say that we arrived at a plain that removes every plant from its bed. The grieving wood is a garland around it, and the sad ditch is to the wood. We halted our steps at the very edge. The floor was coarse, dry sand, not made differently from that once trodden by the feet of Canto. O vengeance of God, how much must you be feared by everyone who reads what was made manifest to my eyes? Of naked souls I saw many flocks, all weeping wretchedly, and different laws seemed to govern them. Some were lying supine on the earth, some were sitting all huddled, and some were walking ceaselessly. The flock that was walking was largest by far, and fewest were those lying to be tortured, but their tongues were looser to cry out. Over all the sand there rained, with a slow falling, broad flakes of fire, like snow in the mountains without wind, like the flames that Alexander saw in those hot parts of India, falling down on his host, whole all the way to the ground, so that he provided for the earth to be trampled by his squadrons, since the burning was better extinguished while separated. So the eternal burning was coming down, and the sand caught fire, like tinder beneath the flint, to double the suffering. Without any rest ever was the dancing of their wretched hands, brushing away the fresh burning, now from there, now from here. I began, Master, you who overcome all things, save the hard demons who came out against us at the gate. Who is that great one who seems not to mind the fire, and lies there scornful and frowning, so that the rain does not seem to ripen him? And he himself, when he perceived that I was questioning my leader about him, cried out, As I was alive, so am I dead. Though Jehove tire out his smith, from whom he wrathful took the sharp thunderbolt that struck me on the last day, and though he weary the others, turn after turn, at the black forge in Mongibello, calling, Good Vulcan, help, help, as he did at the battle of Phlegra, and strike me with all his force, he could not have happy vengeance thereby. Then my leader spoke more forcefully than I had ever heard him. O Capenius, since your pride is not extinguished, you are punished more. No punishment other than your rage would be suffering of a measure with your fury. Then he turned back to me with a better look, saying, This was one of the 7 kings who besieged Thebes, and he had, and seems still to have, God in disdain, and respects him little. But, as I said, his spite is the ornament his breast deserves. Now follow me, and beware that you not place your foot on the burning sand as yet, but keep your feet still close within the wood. Silent we came to where a little stream spurts out of the wood. Its red color still makes me shudder. As from Bulicame, a river comes forth that the sinning women then divide among themselves, so this one flowed down across the sand. Its bed and both its banks were made of stone, and the margins on the sides, so that I perceived our path lay there. Among all the other things I have shown you since we entered the gate whose threshold is denied to none, nothing has been perceived by your eyes as notable as the persistent river which extinguishes all the flames above it. These were my leader's words, and I begged him to grant me the food, since he had granted me the hunger for it. In the midst of the sea lies a ruined land, he said, and then called Crete, under whose king the world once was chaste. A mountain is there that once was happy with water and foliage, called Ida. Now it is desolate, like an outworn thing. Rhea chose it once to be the trusted cradle of her son, and, the better to hide him when he cried, ordered the shouting there. Within the mountain stands erect a great old man, with his back toward Damietta, looking toward Rome and to his mirror. His head is formed of fine gold, and pure silver are his arms and breast. Then he is of brass as far as the fork. From there downward he is all refined iron, except that his right foot is baked clay, and on that one, more than on the other, he stands erect. Each part of him, except his golden head, is broken by a crack that drips tears, which, gathering, bore through that cave. Their course plunges into this valley. They become Acheron, Styx, Phlegethon. Then they go on down through this narrow duct until, where there is no further descent, they become Cochito. And what that pool is like you will see, so that I do not describe it here. And I to him, if the present stream flows down in this way from our world, why does it appear only at this border? And he to me, you know that the place is circular, and although you have come a long way, descending and turning always to the left, toward the bottom, you have not yet turned through the whole circle, so that if we see some new thing, it should not bring amazement to your face. And I again, Master, where are Phlegethon and Lete? For you are silent about the one, and the other you say flows from this rain of tears. In all your questions, certainly you please me, he replied, but the boiling of the red water ought to answer one of them. Lete you will see, but outside this ditch, there where the souls go to be washed once their repented guilt has been removed. Then he said, now it is time for us to leave the wood. See that you come behind me. The margins provide a path, for they are not burned, and above them every flame is extinguished. Canto XV. Now one of the hard margins carries us along, and the vapor from the river gives us a shelter that protects the water and the banks from the fire. And as the Paduans do along the Brenta to protect their farms and castles, before Carinthia feels the thaw. After that image were these made, though not so high nor so thick. Whoever he may have been, the master builder made them. We had already come so far from the wood that I would not have seen where it was, though I had turned back, when we encountered a band of souls coming along the barrier, and each was gazing at us as in the evening. People gaze at one another under the new moon, and they sharpened their brows toward us, as the old tailor does at the eye of his needle. Looked over in this way by such a company, I was recognized by one who seized me by the hem and cried, "What a marvel!" And I, when he stretched out his arm toward me, penetrated with my eye his baked appearance, so that his scorched face did not prevent my intellect from recognizing him, and, reaching my hand down toward his face, I replied, "Are you here, Ser Brunetto?" And he, "O my son, let it not displease you if Brunetto Latino turns back with you a little and lets his troop run on." I said to him, "As much as I can, I beg you, and if you wish me to sit down with you, I will do so, if he over there permits it, for I am going with him." "O son," he said, "whoever of this flock stands still for an instant must then lie for 100 years without brushing off the fire that strikes him. Therefore walk on." I will come along at your skirts, and then I will rejoin my crew, who go bewailing their eternal losses. I did not dare descend from the path to walk level with him, but I kept my head bowed, as one might walk reverently. He began, "What fortune or destiny leads you down here before your last day, and who is this showing you the way?" "Up there above, under the clear sky," I replied. "I lost myself in a valley before my age was full. Only yesterday morning did I turn my back on it. He appeared to me as I was returning there again, and is leading me back home by this road." And he to me, "If you follow your star, you cannot fail to reach a glorious port, if I perceived well during sweet life. And if I had not died so early, seeing the heavens so kindly toward you, I would have given you strength for the work. But that ungrateful, malicious people who came down from Fiesole of old, and still smack of the mountain and the granite, will become your enemies because of your just actions. And that is reasonable, for among the sour crab apples it is not fitting that the sweet fig bear its fruit. Ancient fame in the world calls them blind. They are a people avaricious, envious, and proud. See that you keep yourself clean of their customs. Your fortune holds so much honor in store for you that both sides will hunger for you. But let the grass be far from the goat. Let the Fiesolan beasts make straw of each other, but let them not touch the plant, if any still sprout in their manure, in which may live again the holy seed of the Romans, who remained there when that nest of so much malice was built." If my request were all fulfilled, I replied to him, you would not yet be banished from human nature. For in my memory is fixed, and now it weighs on my heart, the dear, kind, paternal image of you when, in the world, from time to time, you used to teach me how man makes himself eternal, and how grateful I am for that, as long as I must live, be discerned in my language. What you narrate about my path I am writing down and keeping to be glossed, with other text, by a lady who will know, if I reach her. This much I would make manifest to you, that as long as my conscience does not reproach me, I am ready for fortune, whatever she will. This pledge is not new to my ears. Therefore let fortune turn her wheel as she pleases, and the peasant his hoe. My master then turned over his right cheek and gazed at me. Poi disse, "Bene, ascolta chi la nota." Then he said, "He listens well who takes note." Nonetheless, I go speaking with Ser Brunetto, and I ask him of his more famous and accomplished companions. And he to me, "To know of some is fitting, about the others silence is praiseworthy, for the time would be too short for so much noise. In brief, know that they were all clerks and great men of letters, of great fame, all fouled with the same sin in the world. Priscian goes along with that wretched crowd, and Francisco de Accorso too, and if you had desired such scurf, you could see there him who by the servant of servants was transmuted from Arno to Baciglione, where he left his ill-pretended muscles. I would say more, but my walking and my speech can last no longer, for I see new smoke rising from the sand over there. People are coming with whom I must not be. Let my treasure be commended to you, in which I live still, and I ask no more." Then he turned back, and he seemed one of those who at Verona race for the green cloth across the fields. And of those he seemed the one who wins, not the one who loses. Canto XVI. Already I was in a place where one heard the thundering of the water falling into the next circle, like the rumbling that beehives make, when 3 shades came running together out of a herd, passing by beneath the rain of the harsh punishment. They were coming toward us, and each was shouting, "Stop, You who by your clothes seem to be someone from our depraved city. Alas, what wounds I saw in their members, recent and old, burned into them by the flames. It still pains me when I remember. At their shouts my teacher paused. He turned his face toward me and, "Now wait," he said, "to these we should be courteous. And if it were not for the fire that the nature of the place pours down, I would say that haste would more become you than them." When we stood still, they began again their former verse, and on reaching us, they made a wheel of themselves, all three. As is the custom of wrestlers, naked and oiled, spying out their holds and their advantage before they come to blows and wounds, so they wheeled, and each kept his face toward me, so that their necks made a constant motion contrary to their feet. And if the wretchedness of this vile place brings us and our prayers to scorn, one began, and our darkened, scorched appearance, let our fame incline your spirit to tell us who you are, who so confidently step with your living feet through hell. This man, in whose steps you see me tread, though he now goes naked and hairless, was of higher degree than you believe. He was the grandson of the good Gualdrada. Guido Guerra was his name, and in his life he accomplished much with wisdom and the sword. The other, who wears the sand behind me, is Tegiaio Aldobrandi, whose words should have been more pleasing in the world above. And I, placed on the cross with them, was Iacopo Rusticucci, and certainly my fierce wife harms me more than anything else. If I had been protected from the fire, I would have thrown myself down there among them, and I believe my teacher would have suffered it. But because I would have burned and cooked myself, fear vanquished the good will that made me greedy to embrace them. Then I began. Not scorn, but grief was fixed in me by your condition, so great that it will long endure. As soon as my lord here said words that made me think people such as yourselves were coming. I am from your city, and always your works and your honored names I have repeated and heard with affection. I am leaving the bitter and seek the sweet fruit promised me by my truthful leader, but first I must plunge as far as the center. So may your soul long guide your body, he replied then, and so may your fame shine after you. Tell if courtesy and valor dwell in our city as they used to, or if they have utterly forsaken it. For Guglielmo Borsiere, who has been grieving with us but a short time and goes there with our companions, causes us much pain with his words about it. The new people and the rapid gains have generated pride and excess, Florence, in you, so that you already weep for it. So I cried with face uplifted, and the three, who took that as my reply, looked at each other as one looks at the truth. If at other times it costs you so little, they all replied, to satisfy others, happy are you, if you speak so readily. Therefore, if you escape these dark places and go back to see the beautiful stars, when it will be pleasant to say, I was, see that you speak of us to people. Then they broke the wheel, and their quick legs seemed wings to their flight. An amen could not be said more quickly than they disappeared, so my master judged we should move on. I was following him, and we had not walked far, when the sound of the water was so close to us that we could hardly have heard each other speak. Like that river which is first to take its own course toward the east, after Monteviso, on the left side of the Apennines, which is called Acquacetta above, before it falls down into the low bed and loses that name at Forlì, as it thunders there above San Benedetto dell'Alpe, when falling in one cascade where it usually descends by 1,000. So down from a steep cliff we found that dark water resounding, such that in a short while it would have harmed our ears. I had a cord girding me, and with it I had thought at times to capture the leopard with the spotted hide. After I had untied it from around me, as my leader had commanded me, I held it out to him, knotted and wound, and he turned toward his right side and somewhat far from the bank threw it down into that deep pit. Some new thing must answer, I was saying to myself, the strange sign that my master is following with his eyes. Ah, how cautious men should be in the presence of those who not only see our actions, but with their wisdom see our inner thoughts. He said to me, "Soon what I expect, what your thoughts are dreaming, will come up. Soon it will be revealed to your sight." Always to that truth which has the face of falsehood, one should close one's lips as long as one can, for without any guilt it brings shame. But here I cannot conceal it, and by the notes of this comedy, reader, I swear to you, so may they not fail to find long favor, that I saw, through that thick dark air, a figure come swimming upward, fearful to the most confident heart, as one returns who at times goes down to release an anchor caught on a rock or other thing hidden in the sea, and reaches upward as he draws in his feet. Canto XVII. Behold the beast with the pointed tail that passes through mountains and pierces walls in armor. Behold the one that makes the whole world stink. So my leader began speaking to me, and he gestured to it to come ashore near the end of our marble pathway. And that filthy image of fraud came over and beached its head and chest, but did not draw up its tail as far as the bank. Its face was that of a just man, so kindly seemed its outer skin, and the rest of its torso was that of a serpent. It had 2 paws, hairy to the armpits. It had back and breast and both sides painted with knots and little wheels. With more colors, in weave and embroidery, did never Tartars nor Turks make cloths, nor did Arachne string the loom for such tapestries. As skiffs lie on the shore at times, partly in water and partly on land, and as there among the drunken Germans, the beaver positions itself to wage its war, so the wicked beast rested on the rim of stone that encloses the sand. In the emptiness all its tail was wriggling, twisting upward the poisoned fork that armed its tip like a scorpion's. My leader said, "Now our path must bend a little toward the evil beast that lies over there." Therefore we descended toward the right breast and made 10 paces to the edge, to be well beyond the sand and the flames. And when we had reached it, a little further, on the sand, I see people sitting near the empty place. There my master said to me, that you may carry away full experience of this sub-circle. Go and see their behavior. Let your speech there be brief. Until you return, I will speak with this beast, that it may grant us its strong shoulders. So once more along the outer edge of that 7th circle I walked all alone, where the mournful people were sitting. Through their eyes burst forth their pain. Here, there, they sought remedy with their hands at times against the fire, at times against the hot ground. Not otherwise do the dogs behave in the summer, now with muzzle, now with foot, when they are bitten by fleas or gnats or horseflies. When I turn my eyes to their faces, on which the painful fire falls down, I recognized none, but I perceived that from the neck of each hung a bag of a special color, with a special emblem, and their eyes seemed to feed there. And as I come gazing among them, on a yellow purse I saw blue, that had the shape and bearing of a lion. Then, proceeding further with my scrutiny, I saw another, red as blood, displaying a goose, whiter than butter, and one who had his little white sack signed with a fat blue sow, said to me, "What are you doing in this ditch? Now go away, and since you are alive too, know that my neighbor Vitaliano will sit here at my left flank." With these Florentines I am Paduan. Often they thunder in my ears, shouting, "Let the reigning knight come down, who will bring the bag with the 3 goats." Here he twisted his mouth and stuck out his tongue like an ox licking its snout. And I, fearing lest a longer stay might displease him who had warned me to be brief, turned back away from those weary souls. I found my leader had climbed up already onto the fierce animal's rump, and he told me, "Now be strong and bold. Henceforth we descend by stairs like these. Mount in front, for I wish to be between so that its tail can do no harm." Like one whose fit of the quartan fever is so close that his nails are already pale, and he trembles all over merely looking at the shade. So I became at the words I heard. But shame made its threats. That makes a servant bold in the presence of a good lord. I positioned myself on those monstrous shoulders. Yes, I wanted to say, but my voice did not come as I expected. "Be sure to hold me." But he, who had supported me at other times, in other dangers, as soon as I mounted, clasped and braced me with his arms. And he said, "Geryon, now move, make your wheelings large, your descent slow. Consider the new weight you carry." As a little boat moves from its place backward, so he moved thence. And when he felt himself entirely free, he turned his tail where his breast had been, and, extending it, he moved it like an eel's, and gathered the air to himself with his paws. I believe there was no greater fear when Phaethon abandoned the reins, so that the sky was scorched, as still appears, nor when the wretched Icarus felt his loins unfeathering because of the heated wax, as his father shouted to him, "You're on a bad course," then was mine, when I saw that I was in the air on every side, and every sight put out save that of the beast. It goes along swimmingly slowly. It wheels and descends, but I perceive its motion only by the wind on my face from below. I could already hear at my right hand the torrent making a horrible roar beneath us, and so I lean out my head looking down. Then I become more afraid of falling, for I saw fires and heard weeping, so that all trembling I huddled back. And then I saw what I had not seen before, our descending and turning against the great evils that came closer on every side. As when a falcon has been long on the wing, and without seeing lure or prey, makes the falconer say, "Oh me, you are coming down," descending weary to the place it swiftly left, with 100 circlings, lands far from its master, full of disdain and spite. So Geryon placed us on the bottom, at the very foot of the vertical rock, and, our persons unloaded, disappeared like the notch from the bowstring.